Going and welcome everybody. We're finishing up our course, and that's my partner to tell me congratulations. Hang on a second. Hi, Danny. Good. Can I call you back in about an hour? I'm just starting class. Okay. Oh, no problem. Okay. Bye-bye. There we are.
You're supposed to tell him you'll call him when you have no class.
That's right. Yeah, that could be any time. So, well, here we are. Just had a great call with Karen and going over her plans to go into the wine business, and she's up in beautiful Kelowna, British Columbia. Have either of you guys been up, Noel or Rich, been up to the Okanagan?
No, just in Ontario in Canada.
Haven't had the pleasure.
It is so beautiful. All right, so this is kind of wrapping it up. Karen and I were spending some time where to go for information and looking for bottle prices and career opportunities and all sorts of stuff. And Noelle, you got your permits.
Yay! Yes, they're very new.
That's fantastic. I'd like to think the class had something to do with it, but I know it didn't.
Oh, it very much it did.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, tell us about. So, what kind of permits were you applying for? And give us a little background.
Okay, so maybe 2 years ago, I started looking at how to have basically a wine club in Philadelphia, where essentially I could choose wines for people, manage the budget, and deliver it to them, it's impossible to do here in Philadelphia just because of the way the state regulations run. One liquor lawyer recommended I become an importer, but I don't know anything about importing. And so we kind of stalled out. So it took 1.5 years, but I finally met a really good lawyer who knows the PLCB, which is the Liquor Control Board, Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. And she said the way to do this club thing, and it's expanded beyond a club because other things have happened in the meantime, and I can get to that. But what you could do is look at a delivery license where you're essentially a courier, because a consumer has to pick up their wine through a state-controlled store. So that's a wine and spirit store. So in Pennsylvania, you can't go to a regular retail store and buy wine or liquor or beer. It has to be through a state store.
And you're not allowed to get deliveries at home, am I correct?
You can, but it's a gray area. Basically, okay. The state that you're is delivering to Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania basically have to have this reciprocity rule. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they don't have it, and it really relies on the carrier if they're going to deliver or not. If UPS will deliver, FedEx, or whoever your carrier is. So it's kind of a gray area whether they will prosecute you or not. And then you can do it by if a client in, say, Pennsylvania buys wine from New Jersey, when you buy from the New Jersey person selling it, you kind of agree that all rights transfer to you, meaning you are responsible if the PLCB does decide to crack down. And normally they don't. They stick to underage drinking and that kind of thing, but it's always a risk. So she recommended to me this new lawyer that I found to get this delivery license, allowing me to act as the courier. And it would also let me order the wine for people, make recommendations. And the state stores actually do have a pretty good selection, but maybe not on hand. So if you want to make a selection that they don't have on hand, it's called a special liquor order. So I also teach wine classes. I touch a lot of parts of the industry. So I can now legally teach the classes, make the orders, pick them up, and have them delivered. In the meantime, I became a partner in an import company that was already in existence. And so that's a separate LLC than mine. So this delivery license can play into that business as well. So that's kind of a really, really quick summarization of something that's been trying to happen for about 2 years. And you had said last week, I think to Paul or somebody, make sure you have a good lawyer. And that's been some of that's exactly true. The woman I've got in front of, I knew about her 2 years ago, and they were like, no, you're too small time. You've got to really get in the game further before you can even get in front of her.
Yeah.
So she's the one who recommended the license, and it really does touch all categories. The only thing was I don't have a car. I live downtown Philadelphia, so I'm like, how am I supposed to deliver things? I don't have a car. And so I've done a lot of reading of some of the corporate licensing, and you can do commercial rentals by the hour. So it's kind of checked all the boxes. And it's something, having a courier license was not something I ever thought I would be trying to get.
That's right. There
Hook up
there
with
goes
Uber.
so well with a case of wine and an Uber making a delivery.
Right, or like one of those shopping carts people in the city have.
Right. I think that's called homeless.
Yeah, right, and so then you have your security issues to worry about. So that license is working really well with the actual importing license. So now I can find the wines, my partners can bring them into the state, I can pick them up at the store and bring them to the people. And it's really cool because I'm in Center City, Philadelphia. It's only 2 square miles, or maybe 2.1 or something. There's 193,000 people. The demographic is around, age 35, pretty good income, like maybe 75,000 or something. So they're right in my demographic anyway. So I have a pretty small area to really have to navigate and a pretty big customer base. And basically 3 stores will cover the whole area, 3 liquor stores where I have to pick it up.
That's great.
I'm trying to think it through, but so this class really helps me think of some of the things I might not consider.
Well,
If they're all that close together in that tight of an area, is it possible to have a place where they can come by and pick it up?
Oh, absolutely. I can do that too, but the whole delivery factor it's so hard to park here or do anything if you're not walking. So if you have a couple of bottles of wine you don't have time to pick up, or you just don't even know what to buy, it's just such a convenience factor. I mean,
drive-through.
Right, we do need that. I mean, for example, we get everything delivered, even groceries. It's just so hard to maneuver around here.
Well, and there a couple of observations. One, so few people really even think of all the opportunities that, who makes the tanks behind Rich? Other than the fact that they're absolutely beautiful. But
Inox.
So inox, which is French, that's the word French used for stainless steel, inoxidable, and so it's free from oxidation. There's also, there's the legal end of things. I think I've already mentioned somebody took my class last year, I believe it was, and she wanted to rearrange her entire life to work in the legal area of the wine business, and she never even thought, well, she's got Virginia and Maryland and Pennsylvania all within shouting distance of Washington, D.C. So she's now started that company, and that's going. I just ran into, speaking of the International Bulk Wine and Spirits Show, I was doing a presentation, and one of my students from last year was actually in the back of the room, and during the Q&A, and she and her husband live in Ohio. They were going to try and start an urban winery and all this kind of stuff, and they wanted to export wines to China, and they're in business now, it turns out. She got finally, and it was a great deal like it was for you, Noel. There were so many restrictions on, but this was more on a production standpoint, not sort of the logistics and local delivery. And then another friend who's a very close, longtime friend of mine from Turkey, she's a sommelier that works at a very famous New York restaurant, and she's in the process of developing a wine concierge service. And
I love that.
And it's who cares and about what? If you live in DC and you live in New York, how do you get to a wine store? And for so many people who don't drive and so forth, And so home delivery is a big deal in those, in those markets in both Washington, D.C. and in, I was really surprised, 30 years ago when I was a retailer, when I made my first trip to New York, and I'd heard about these great stores that do these incredible offerings of Bordeaux futures and, California direct sales and whatever. And all they are is a little storefront. And it's like, how in the name of God do they do all that business out of there? And they keep the storefront, but most people want the wines delivered to their home. I'm such a stingy shopper. I never would think that wow, some people lead really busy lives that aren't in the wine business, and a job, a career, something like a concierge service.
Exactly.
They're not that concerned with the price necessarily. What they're concerned is getting the products that they got the points or the scores or the critics or whatever, having somebody that really knows the business kind of looking out for them and running this personalized service. And then Karen and I were talking a bit earlier about her teaching background and credentials. There's a lot of wine education programs. The content's not very good. We just sort of dive in wherever you are. And frankly, a lot of people that teach about wine aren't good teachers. So, isn't it great to have that in your background? It's easier to teach a good teacher or a good salesman about wine than a wine geek how to sell or about teaching. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a battle with the state. And first, not a battle, but it was just kind of like everything I came up with that I thought was innovative or would work was a no. It's just so hard to sell wine here. You basically have to be a restaurant. If you want to be your own retail situation, they already mark up the price of the liquor control board. They already mark it up just for the wine to be in the state. And then I think if you have your own retail store, you have to have a certain amount of food sales, and then you have to mark it up like an extra $3 per bottle or something than what the state store sells. So who would ever buy your wine? They say you can do it, but no one's going to pay $3 extra per bottle for the exact same bottle that they can get down the street at the state store. So it was just kind of a lot. And this license, I don't even think it's very well known, because I thought, well, surely someone is doing this. It can't be this easy that someone just says courier license and then it works. And it doesn't exist. So there are couriers here in Philadelphia, but they're for the big restaurants and some of the grocery stores that are selling. So I don't know. Maybe it's an opportunity that will only exist for a couple of months before somebody else comes along, but we're going to see what we can do in that time.
Well, that's great. We'll get that first mover advantage and own the space. And then our friend Bob Trimble.
Yes, I saw he imported his rosé today.
Yes, my God. So there's one of my favorite people in this industry is a guy named Bob Trimble, and he's in Philly also. Bob and I met a trip when I was actually an importer and a broker working in Atlanta, and I was the broker for all the George Duboeuf Beaujolais.
Okay.
And so he and I met on a trade junket in Beaujolais in 1986. So that's how far Bob and I go back. And Bob's a wine educator. He's worked at kind of all sorts of levels in this industry. And he was just announcing on Facebook that he's got his first wine imported. I guess it's in the market right now. It's actually real. A rosé from Spain. Yep. That's terrific.
Check that out.
One of the things also, Karen and I touched on this a bit, Mike Santos and I and a couple of other people that are also looking career-wise in this course. And everybody keep in mind, we're all brands, and promoting and marketing. Noelle, I guess you're getting ready to do podcasts and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I do a lot of writing and my students are always asking. So I thought no one's going to visit a website and read a long article. So if you make it kind of lively and interesting and they can listen to it, I think it's got a better chance of being heard.
Yeah, finding those ways to deliver content and interest. You can do your own personal mission, vision, and goals. A lot of people don't do that. But what do you see yourself doing and when in the future? It's when I'm consulting, I think I've mentioned I'm representing a Chinese a principal and investors for a winery search in Australia. And I've been really working hard to kind of narrow down what the heck do they really want. And then it finally occurred to me, well, duh, if I could have Danny, the partner who just called is my Chinese partner. She lives in Seattle, and she's from Harbin in northern China. And so I said, to sort of narrow the scope of what we're doing and get a fix on what we're looking for in Australia, let's see if we can get a vision statement. And so they wanted a brand and they wanted all these things, but it was going to be really expensive, and you're paying for a lot of goodwill. But then when their vision came out, when we actually got them to articulate a bit, we were able to literally just about get rid of all these properties we were looking at that had restaurants, and they had accommodations, and they had wedding chapels and all this kind of stuff, because maybe they weren't really looking for the brand. What they're looking for is something that can win awards and have prestige, but their interest is in selling the wine in China. Mm. So once we figured out what they really wanted to do, it gave us the ability to be way more focused in what we're searching for and so forth. And that goes for careers, that goes for permits, right? Yes. What do you really accomplish? One of the other people in the course, he and I had a great conversation day before yesterday about a business model for New York City. And we started going through why there might not be any businesses like this already, because of the challenges and the permitting and the licensing, that you're basically starting to run a bar. Is that what you really want to be doing? Well, no, I wanted to be this. Okay, then let's focus on that, because the way you're articulating the business that you envision, it's really a bar that you would be running, and in this case, a wine bar. And so anyways, it, helps out a lot to know where we're going in life.
Yes.
And as much what we don't want to be doing, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah. All right. So it's kind of cleanup time. Any lingering questions, topics?
Oh, Noel, those were tartrates in your wine, by the way.
Oh, I just saw that. I haven't cooled it off yet. So would that still be?
Somebody probably did. I have a bottle right here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, see that?
Yes.
That's tartrates in the bottom. It's because the wine hasn't been cold stabilized. So if it gets cooled down, it doesn't matter if you did it or it happened somewhere else, it gets cooled down and the tartrates fall out.
Okay. Yeah.
Otherwise known as wine crystals. And
yeah, it's really interesting. It's just so hazy and like almost dusty or something in there, but
on the tartrate end, so it's tartaric acid, and then when it becomes cold, it forms a salt it becomes potassium bitartrate. You might know it as cream of tartar. It's used in baking.
Yep.
And I thought, so is it a hard substance, or like this almost looks like spider webs?
It's crystallized.
Well, in Ritz, there's some other plausible explanations of what that is also. And this brings up a category of wine called natural wines,
Yeah, that's what.
which is an area of great debate, because a lot of people are just leaving the lees in the wine. And so they not only don't filter or fine the wine. So filtering is a physical exclusion of particles. Fining is a process of chemical adhesion or something that. So if you're making consommé, you beat the egg whites and you pour it into the chicken stock, and when the egg whites coagulate, it attaches all the particles and makes your consommé crystal clear. And that's how they use egg white fining in wine. Instead of heat doing the coagulation, it's the acidity of the wine. So at Chateau Latour, and literally 4 egg whites per barrel, one at a time, and they sit there. I've got a great slide of this, if anybody knows how you look at slides anymore, or what slides are, but they have to separate every egg white. They hold it up to a candle to make sure there's not a blood spot, and so that's the act. That's fining. So it's introducing an agent to the wine that clarifies it, versus filtering, which is passing it through. And then there are different materials that are actually have a combination of exclusion and having a chemical reaction. So it's in production a neat area. So what they're doing with the natural wine movement is actually stirring the lees and then bottling it. So that actually could be the lees in there.
Could be.
It's probably not cold stabilized, so it could also, with time, the tartrates will actually become crystals. So they won't be in suspension. And is the particles in that wine, that's sort of a perpetual suspension in it?
Yes.
Okay. So there's also something called a protein haze.
That's what I was wondering, if it was protein. I mean, it's probably all of it. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So look up protein haze, and that's actually what it looks like to me, because if it was lees, it would fall out. If it was tartrates, it would fall out. And when you see tartrates in red wine, it's a gunk that's often adhered to the cork. And so it's stained purple because of the coloring in the wine, but it'll also have a crystalline kind of a structure. So
Okay.
I'm guessing what that wine is a protein haze. They're selling it as a natural wine. And one of the big arguments against natural wine is just there's just bad shit. You know, that somebody really didn't have the know-how or whatever, and you rarely run into these things. And then there's a final characteristic, and it's called ropiness. And if it looks like almost it's connected, like in like a thread or something, look up the term ropey, R-O-P-E-Y, wine. And that might be what it is also. And I haven't seen that in 60 years. So
That would be cool if it is.
yeah.
But I'll also put it in the fridge and cool it down, and I'm sure, I feel like those crystals are definitely going to be there. And
Yeah,
Well,
stuff
the
in
crystals,
bottom of
that's
that
actually
bottle,
when you
too.
freeze it.
yeah, there's.
And so if you see somebody cold stabilizing in a cellar, the entire tank, depending on configuration and whatever, the entire tank will look frosted, because they're bringing the temperature down to near freezing. So it's not just putting it in the fridge, but if a wine is not cold stabilized and then it's shipped a long way and it gets really cold and so on, and actually freezing and thawing wine has very, very little if any, impact on flavor and character of the wine, other than it will certainly precipitate any tartrates that haven't come out of it.
So when you're talking about using the egg white as fining, do they actually kind of stir it with a spoon manually, or is it a
Nope.
mechanized process, or
I would,
how does it look?
and this is great for the kind of follow-up. Find a bottle of wine like that cloudy one, and then look up cloudy wine and see how many variations that you're going to find. You know, Rich pointed to one that's really obvious, but it's also this movement away from, and there are literally people who are making wine with what would be considered major flaws of acetic acid, which is vinegar, with Brettanomyces, which is the smell of barnyard and so forth. And they're doing it purposefully. Mm-hmm. So they may have even stirred the lees and then bottled it that way, just, because it's more natural and has more, I don't know, stuff in it.
If you drink it, you're not allowed to shave your armpits.
Roughage.
It's got protein and fiber in it.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So
I'll have to follow up with that bottle on the Facebook thread.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, I'd be interested.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It was Albarino, and it was just so weird looking. So.
Yep. Yeah, I guess in my next trip to Portland, I'm going to be looking for to go visit natural wine places, because it's a thing.
Oh, definitely.
You better go incognito. I've seen some of your posts about those guys.
Oh, if you got a market for it, I'm all, we're going. History repeats itself. It used to be a lot of wines were unstable, poorly made, had flaws in them, and if that now is a category that people are seeking, those wines are easy to make.
Yeah. There's a couple right back here.
Yeah, throw it in a bucket and bottle it and just pretend that's the way it's supposed to be. What kind of food does it go with, right?
Everything.
Rancid. All right. What else?
I don't know.
Okay.
Can I ask, what is your favorite wine?
Oh, for me?
Yes.
All right. Well, if you don't know yet, I don't drink.
I thought your favorite wine was Red Ass Rhubarb.
No, I was championing Red Ass Rhubarb wine from South Dakota, from Prairie Berry Winery, just because it almost won a platinum medal in a competition.
Oh, that was your favorite wine. Okay.
No, I've had so many memorable wines, but I'm a recovering alcoholic. I actually have 26 years of sobriety, which is why I do the work that I do now. God only knows it's not an accident that my wife and I last May had our 26th wedding anniversary also. Yeah, and so I went into recovery just a couple of years after passing the Master of Wine exam. And it was, just kind of at a point I started a little early. Somebody may have gotten a clue, a 14-year-old learning about wine and reading wine books. But it's a family disease. And my commitment, my dedication now is helping anybody who loves wines, whether it's natural wines and that movement, whether it's Red Ass Rhubarb wine, White Zinfandel Moscato, big ass Cabernets, Robert Parker's, greatest hits or whatever. My vision is that one day people can freely express what they like about wine without the embarrassment and stigma that we all face. It's like, oh God, I don't know. You know, people, and I think every one of us can relate to this. People look at us as the guides, you know, as the go-to for information. And then you get a wine list, or you're looking at an array of wines, and I have no clue in the world. For a long time, I would pretend, because I can make stuff up, and if you can have that level of pretense, it's easy to get by in this industry. But it's become so pervasive that that people would rather lie than tell you what they like from their heart. My work in China, so much of what's going on with wine consumption there is about fashion and something called face, that it's not really about what you like. A number of years ago, I did a series of events, and we did a survey of everybody coming to the events. Literally, when you came in and registered, you had to fill out a little survey. It was just 5 questions. And one of the questions, what style of wine do you like? Sparkling, sweet wines, white wines, red wines, etc. And literally, it was 100% red wines. Okay, because red is metaphorically so powerful in China. The government said drink red wine for the heart, and because it's red, symbolically the blood and health and gifting and prosperity. And so we had 4 wines that were being served: Moscato, a Chardonnay, a Pinot Noir, and a Cabernet Sauvignon. And we used the tried and true, highly scientific methodology. What wine's gone first? And it was really interesting to observe that everybody was toasting with the red wine, and they were drinking the Moscato.
Yeah.
And so the Moscato was gone way before any of the other wines. But everybody likes red wine because you're an outlier if you don't.
I have that happen in a lot of my classes. I teach at Wharton, and we'll do the intro classes are basically wine 101, and we always do 8 wines and 3 whites, 5 reds, and we start with a nice light, something easy, usually Riesling. And I use the same method as you to determine the best wine, which one's gone. And it never matches what people say. They always say, oh, they love the Cabernet Sauvignon, or Tres Picos is a Grenache that does very well. But yeah, it's always the Rieslings and the Sauvignon Blanc that's actually gone. And then people will come up after class and say that, like, well, I actually like this one, but I didn't want to say it. And I'm like, I'm like, no, if you like it, then it's good. Like, it's okay to like that over the Cab.
And throw Moscato in there next time and reduce the red wines by 1.
Yeah,
So
okay.
put actually a sweet wine in there. And when the people like the sweet wine or the Riesling, congratulate them for having the highest sensory perception acuity.
I usually tell them that. I'm like, you can usually pick up the people who have the more, I always feel like the super taster end of the spectrum usually picks those wines. So I tell them that in secret, that I don't want the people who actually really like the Cabs to feel like they're not tasting.
No, just say there is the spectrum, and it's, so there's, and this leads to just be on the lookout for the cliches. Women are better tasters. Well, we're actually looking at data that at the highest end of the spectrum is 70% female, but it's also 30% men. Mm-hmm. So categorically, that's not true, as a blanket statement. And if I've got way less taste buds and you've got way more taste buds, you're probably the worst person to help find me what I like, and vice versa. And so what's happened is the red wines, because of price, because of you get a big glass. If you get Riesling, you get a little glass. If you get a big red wine, you get big glasses. They command the big prices ad nauseum. We've created a tyranny of the minority of the people who love and revere those kind of wines. And it's an inverse correlation of actually enjoyment to the larger spectrum of people who are at the higher end of the sensitivity range.
Absolutely. That makes
So,
perfect sense.
you know, the more alcohol, the more new oak, the more tannin, the more complexity, et cetera, et cetera. And we just don't look at it that way because we really don't look at the market. And I guess that's probably, you know, as we're wrapping up this course, that's the one thing that know the business, know the structure, know what's required, the permits and so forth. Finding that unique combination, like Noelle's done, is just brilliant, you know, and get in there and carve that out and make that work. And there we go.
Thank you.
All right. What else?
We were talking about natural wines before. Do you see any other new trends coming up, or what's next? What's the next big thing?
Next big thing for me is personalization.
Okay.
And I say that with a self-serving nature also, because that's what I've decided to dedicate my career to. The industry doesn't seem to be able to promote wine as a good, healthy beverage option. I'm seeing more and more of these, you know, keto wines, and the average, you know, most wines in a grocery store have more sugar than Coca-Cola. And it's a company called First Leaf or something like that. And I just keep sending them hate mail, you assholes. You know, what are you doing? And one of the really good wine education sites that Wine Folly, I think it was, had published this thing. Oh, when you drink 2 Buck Chuck, you know, we had talked about this earlier, there's frogs and workers and everything goes into the bin and they don't care, and you're drinking this crap. And it's like, boy, you really don't understand that at every one of these wineries are people who are passionate about what they do. And yeah, they may be sourcing fruit from this area, but you wouldn't believe the passion of those people and the knowledge and how hard they're working and the jobs they provide. And it's like we can't, not knowing how to steer people in an appropriate direction, we feel we've got to, oh, Parker's dead, you know, Parker's over, that's the 100-point system is dead. It's not. It won't be. There are people who care about that, and they should be respected for whatever reason it works for them, if it works for them. And saying that's my attitude with the natural wine movement. If there are people that they can drink that wine and there's a market for that and they're successful, I'm absolute, you know, go for it. It'll give a lot of people introduction to wine flaws and how wine used to actually be. Ad nauseum, you know, congratulating sweet wine drinkers for their perceptive acuity. It's not a happy place to live a lot of times because, you know, there's a lot of distraction and ADD and all sorts of other things. So it's just, you know, that my vision for the future of wine is that we need to tone things down at the geek end with the descriptive languaging and whatever. We're scaring the hell out of people. We need to clean up the information in the education programs and and we need to completely rethink this whole wine and food thing. It's just so out of hand. So I don't know what the next big product is yet, Karen, but we're getting also into, we've been enjoying an extended period of prosperity in the U.S. wine industry, and that's getting ready to at least hit a plateau, if not start to trend down. And just when everybody thinks, oh no, we're fine, that won't happen, that's usually when it hits the fan.
Are you aware of any restaurants or wine bars that have somewhat adopted your philosophy of encouraging people to try the spectrum and
Not a yet.
if they like the sweet wine? In other words, is anybody applying what you're talking about commercially?
Yes,
kind
to
of
some
passing
degree or another. You know what? In the tech industry, they talk a lot about something called stickiness.
Mm-hmm.
And stickiness is the ability to have a product or a concept that stays over time, right? So I developed the wine programs that are in place in dozens of chains and hundreds of individual restaurants. So the most notable one, Rich, is do you guys know P.F. Chang's? And the
Sure.
PF in P.F. Chang's is Paul Fleming, and Paul's an old friend of mine. They're based in Phoenix, Scottsdale area, and very early on I started working with them before they became what they are today. So we're going back 25 years or more, and one of their challenges was wanting to franchise. People just hear that, oh, Chinese food doesn't go with wine, so drink a Riesling, whether you like it or not, or some cockamamie stuff. So I designed their wine list, I designed their wine program, and I actually worked with their corporate chef, adjusting the actual dishes so that they had less sweetness, more acidity, and were less interactive with the wines. But a number of years ago, a really wonderful woman, Mary Melton, took over the program. And so it's all still alive in format today and whatever, but it's evolved with a new person into that place. Fleming's Steakhouse is Paul Fleming from P.F. Chang's. And I helped them design their entire program also. And a number of years ago, they asked me, well, what's the big thing? And I said, you know what, it's sweet wine. As much as everybody wants to push back. And this was also while I was doing the Moscato reformulation and repositioning. And they didn't have any sweet wines per se on the main wine list. They were all on the dessert wine list. So if you wanted sweet wine, you had to wait. You had to wait. So they put a sweet section on. Had some killer wines in the section, and within 30 days, it was the highest performance flavor section of their entire wine list at a steakhouse.
Really?
And look at how we've preconceived under the idea that red wine goes with red meat, that the fat and the protein soften the tannin, which they don't. If you watched, the other episode. You go into, that's the expectation, whether you want red wine or not, that's what goes with this. And you're going to get a little bit of a look if you stray from the given course. This is the surest way to send people to cocktails or to go out in the corridor and smoke a joint or something like that. I don't know. But
Do you think any of the sweet wine move or natural wine movement has to do? Is it cheaper to produce just because it seems like there's less machines involved? I don't know. Is it something that might be cheaper to produce, or is that too?
No, actually, in some ways, you even have to be more careful because fermentations that aren't complete or other fermentations that can start that aren't primary alcoholic fermentation like malolactic and whatever, those things explode bottles. And so my own thought is that a lot of what's going on with the natural wine movement is just this sort of organics and natural, the idea of something natural, and that there seems to be a bridge and now I'm just speculating. I don't know what I'm talking about, and this is why I want to go to Portland. But Portland is like a craft beer epicenter, right? And there are these craft breweries. Bend has more craft breweries per capita than any city in the U.S. And they ferment just all sorts of crazy shit. I went over to Linfield College in Willamette over in McMinnville. A really great friend of mine, Dr. Greg Jones, who's the preeminent wine climate specialist globally, is now their wine director.
That's cool.
Yeah, and great. If anybody ever wants anything on climate change and whatever, Greg Jones. And he is the man. And his dad, he grew up in Southern Oregon. He's really, really smart, and actually turns out to be quite a character. But while I was in Willamette visiting him, his assistant was a bartender over at a craft brewery, also after hours. And it turned out it was in walking distance from the bed and breakfast they were putting me up in for the meetings and stuff I was doing with the university. And I go over there, it was a frickin' blast. And it was jam-packed, people spilling out in an old building across the tracks from downtown, sort of inaccessible, hard to get to. So it wasn't a matter of location. They had a barrel room where they were aging things in barrels, and they're a brewery primarily, but one of the things in the barrel was a co-ferment. All right, co-ferment is usually applied when you put Syrah and then add Viognier, and you co-ferment them. But they were co-fermenting beer and Viognier.
Oh, cool.
I know.
Wow.
And they were barrel fermenting it. They were doing a cranberry, concoction thing, and they had stainless steel tanks just like behind Rich. And one of the things that was one of their most popular offerings was a Brettanomyces beer. Brettanomyces is the bacteria Brettanomyces endecora create what the barnyardy smells like poop. Yeah, and used in if you really, really know what you're doing, one of the most famous people who uses the Brettanomyces is Helen Turley, the Turley wines. Mm-hmm. And so they've actually got a formula for it. And then old people like me, I love the smell of Brett and to a pretty high level that other people who have been trained on technical flaws find the levels that I like is commercially totally unacceptable. All right. And here they are making a wine and inoculating it with Brettanomyces just to give it that shitty character.
I have a friend who does craft beer brewing, and he does really well with it. And he was saying his bready beers do the best.
Yeah.
He's saying that's actually what, when he's got to come up with a new concept, he bases it on that and then kind of goes from there.
Yeah, and you've got the whole extreme, extreme hop, extreme alcohol kind of a thing. So, I have a speculative correlation of natural wine to a lot of the practices, because a lot of the craft beers are bottled cloudy and unfiltered, unfined, and so who knows.
Thanks for that explanation.
Alrighty. Anything else?
Nope.
Actually, could I ask Rich something?
Oh,
Sure.
Please.
On Facebook, you have a very beautiful tasting template for rating the wines. Did you make that from your?
Oh, yeah. You mean on the blending thing?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I just whipped that up on the laptop.
Okay. Okay. Which program is it? Just Excel, or what did you use?
I think I just used Word.
Okay. Okay. I thought it
Can't
looked
remember. It was either Excel or
Would you be willing to
Excel,
share?
or I could find it and email it to you.
Sure.
Why don't you email it to me and I'll send it out to the class?
I'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, and this was one of the other things Karen and I were talking about, venturing forward from here, for your own tasting, for your own edification, find the system that works for you, whether it's the 100 point, whether it's, all of this Carmen Miranda bananas and lychees and cherries and metaphors and whatever. I would not pass the master sommelier exam, and very likely might not even pass the practical portion of the master wine tasting now, because they demand, and Karen and I were talking about, there's something called a selection bias, and my brain just never worked in that way with all these tasting notes and cataloging and whatever. If I can't figure out a way to get it in my brain, I don't do notes. If I do notes, and I forced myself for years, and that I never look at the notes. They're actually kind of meaningless. But I always had this deductive process that I could say, okay, color is showing these. Is it age? Is it grape? Is it pre-fermentation? Is it fermentate? What made it like that? And so I have a very strong deductive technical process of tasting wine, and it works for me. And I had to find that out. I struggled with all these other different ways of trying it for many, many years before I finally said, you know what, I really don't care what anybody else is doing. I've got to figure this out for myself. And then one of the things that I discovered is observing other people, and a touch of cocoa with a little bit of kefir lime. People get with these crazy things. You can actually learn then to taste in a technical or deductive fashion, and then add the words that most people would associate with that. So it's kind of reverse engineering. I tell the story of one of my greatest friends and heroes in this industry passed away earlier this year, Yves Duran, and we were tasting in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's making these notes, and he says, "What do you smell in this wine?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure, and what do you get? He said, it's, violets and a touch of tar and, all this kind of crap. And I said, okay, great. And then a number of years later, we're tasting, and I picked up a wine. I said, hey, do you get violets and tar and these? Oh, yes, finally, you're learning how to taste? I said, no, but I'm learning that when there's a certain smell, you'll say this. And so, be patient with yourself. Really get how many people are just making stuff up in this industry. It's so easy to do. The movie Sour Grapes, I'm going to refer to you all night, Karen. All these people spending tens of thousands of dollars for bottles of wine and these rare wine tastings, and then it turns out, there were, in their midst was the biggest perpetuator of counterfeit wines in history, and they're drinking a lot of his wines, but they don't know they're counterfeit. So, how much is it all in our imagination? The flip side of that, this is also marketing. It's being able to be able to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to throw stuff in a tank and I'm just going to let it go, and whatever happens, happens. That's the way wine was made 1,000 years ago or 6,000 years ago, and actually 100 years ago a lot of the times. And there's all these things that happen that people are oblivious to, that you would never know unless you read old books like Larousse Gastronomique, and there's a whole section on wine and winemaking, and you'll find protein haze and ropey and all these kind of crazy things. So this Larousse Gastronomique. Oh, my new camera's back asswards, isn't it?
No, it's coming up.
Are you
Normally.
showing up right?
Yeah, we can see it right.
There's also counterfeit that, where, for instance, a wine will get a very high score in Wine Spectator in their top 100 or something, and it'll be a fairly small production, maybe 300, 400, 500 cases. I think they upped the numbers that they use now to get at the very top, but nevertheless, that winery will sell out of it in a heartbeat, and then they're out on the market buying bulk wine and bottling it all they can and just selling it as it's the same thing that won the awards.
Right, or they'll use the award in a generic way, and it'll be the new vintage and so forth.
Yeah.
And Noel, if you get this book, this is the 1961 Crown edition. You can get it on Amazon for about $20-25.
Really? Oh, I love books like that. Okay.
Yeah, and this has been my Bible for 53 years, so it's amazing.
I will definitely be getting that book.
Yeah, and in the wine and food section, this is where you'll see it says, when the finest courses are served, the entremet, bring out the Lafite, the Romanée, or if the guests prefer the white wines of Sauternes, the San Joseph, were all sweet wines. So unequivocally, they say, match the wine to the diner, not the dinner. And that's how it always was anyways.
You have to be familiar. I'm blanking out on the guy's name right now, but he was chief technology officer for Microsoft, and he's a chef, and he wrote, I think his operation's called the Cooking Lab or something like that. He wrote the multi-volume cookbook. Are you familiar with that?
No, not offhand.
I could go. The home version, I think, is called Modern Cuisine for the Home. You're not familiar with him?
I might be. Modern Cuisine book. Modernist Cuisine, maybe?
Modernist Cuisine, that's it.
Nathan Myhrvold.
Myhrvold. Yeah, Nathan Myhrvold.
Yeah. No, don't know that one.
I'm surprised you don't know about him. He should be right up your alley.
Not necessarily. Um,
Why not?
I mean, my focus is on the consumer. My focus is the genetics, the neurology, and the psychology of it all.
A lot of his is on that, actually. I mean, the original cookbook he came up with was geared more towards a professional chef, but then all the recipes and everything, he reduced them so that with the science, so that a person at home could do the same things that world-class, Michelin chefs could do. They could do it at home by using the science that he perfected for it. But he had an interesting test that he did with wine where he said, well, if you use one of these little aerators and adding oxygen to the wine, when you open it up, whether it's a young wine or whether it's an old wine, if that works good, then what happens if you throw it in a blender?
Well, the throwing in the blender actually goes to UC Davis in the 60s.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. So
well, he did it and got a panel of sommeliers, and I think all but one chose the wine out of the blender to be better than the others.
Yeah, which not to dive into that, but there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, and it's fascinating. And again, there's a guy in Quebec, Canada, that's doing molecular wine and food pairing, but the flaw is, what if you don't like it?
Yeah.
Or what if you have the genetics that you don't have the receptor for that molecule, which happens all the time, or ad nauseum. So again, my role's a bit different than a lot of what people think, and it's really about easier systems, empowering, and whether you like mixing your wine with fruit juice or cassis or adding a cube of sugar, wait till you see what they were fermenting in France. This was written in 1938. I actually had a dog named after the author, Prosper, Vizsla. And we come up with more and more ways to complicate everything. And again, we're overlooking the most critical part of it. Who are you? Who's your market? What do you care about? And when I play who cares, I'm playing it at a really high level. How can I drill into it so I can make a difference in your life? And that goes, and same for restaurant training and for the world of sommeliers. Look for me in the news either as being lynched or shot by sommeliers, but this is going to be a pretty strong attack in the next year. We're just so full of ourselves that it's not hospitality anymore.
Oh, I cannot wait to see that.
Hospitality is both host and guest both come from the word ghost. So Beetlejuice, Beetlegeist. A guest is an unknown spirit or being in your presence, and actually physically or not. Poltergeist was somebody that was renting a room that was making a lot of noise. So it was literally a loud guest. And then the word host comes from the Latin. So Geist is German, and host or hostess, Hostis, is Latin for ghost. The word hostage, if you were leaving the inn or the accommodations without payment, they would keep a member of your party or family as collateral. So you'd come back, that's a hostage. That's where the word hostage came from, is actually from that practice. And so there's something for us in hospitality that actually brings us closer to people and knowing people, And the way we're going about wine, it's so much all about the wine, and you got to know this language, and you got to memorize that. And you've got people that are making shit up. Oh, I can smell the schist, the rock. It's like, get real. Come on.
Did you write that part in your book about the guest poltergeist? And is that in your book, Why We Like the Wines? Okay, I was like, I feel like you've heard that. Okay,
yeah.
But I read.
And I do a whole lecture. I do a lot of. I did a big tourism conference in Okanagan a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was all about how we've lost our sense of hospitality. How can you, as a tasting room, how can you, as a wine delivery and logistics coordinator, or you as a great broker, getting to know people, building that trust, bringing it closer together. That's what I think the next big thing is, Karen. And I feel that very, very strongly. And I feel it's wine education, the way we do it, wine certifications are taking us further and further away from hospitality. And we don't know it, which is the real danger coming down the pike as more and more options are available to the consumer. So that's it, kids. We're done. I want to acknowledge you guys. This has been, my wife can tell the difference in a class by how long the webinars go. And that's usually a function of having people show up and be here. And this has really been a blast for me. So I really thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Teaching this course is something I love to do. And you guys have all really made it worthwhile for me. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been quite enjoyable. And I noticed your enthusiasm when you showed up a day early once.
Oh, man, I show up when no one's here. I show up a day early. I get a phone call. Hey, Tim, are you coming to class? I think that's the first time ever I zoned out, and one of my students called and said, hey, are you joining us? That was hysterical.
Well, we were having a lot of fun before you even got there, though.
Yeah, I know it. I know. They're all throwing spit wads at the chalkboard or at your screens.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody have a good evening, and I'll send that email to you. You're talking about the little sheet that people rated their wines on? Is that?
That one.
Right?
That one.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I'll
guys.
email it.
By the way, there was a question about the Facebook page. I just leave that up for a month or so. You can PM anybody that you want to share contact information with and so forth. I love keeping up with people over the years. Let me know how your businesses are going and whatever. And thank you all for the honor of letting me teach the course. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good night.